Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our career panel on natural resources. We have a terrific panel for you today. Very excited to have this discussion with these experts in the field. This panel, or the series of panels, is brought to you by Career Connect Southwest, which is a program of EST 112. My name is Scott Culbertson. I'm the Career Connected Learning Coordinator for Southwest Washington. And I want to thank the panelists especially, but also I want to thank the students who submitted questions for this panel. This is by far so far the largest number of questions we've had from students. And we do appreciate that, as well as all the students who are watching here today. So we hope you learn something about this field and something that you did not know before, as I know I will. And I'd like to now introduce Chad Mullen, who's going to be your moderator for this session.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Chad Mullen. I work for the Career Connect Southwest Network as well with Scott. And we have a wonderful panel here today. And I'd like to take a few minutes right off the top to have each of our panelists introduce themselves with their name, job title, where they work, and a bit about yourself as a person. Coley, will you start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Coley Huffman. I'm an environmental consultant with a private firm based in Southwest Washington. So my specific title is a biologist, and essentially I work in a variety of sort of natural resources components. So I do a lot of critical areas permitting, which means sort of helping people navigate the permitting process when they're usually doing development in association with like wetlands or streams, things like that. As well as doing sort of wildlife surveys, allowing people to get a sense of sort of what's out there as well. About me as a person, I live in Portland, Oregon. I really enjoy the outdoors, so that lends well to my job. I like to go hiking and hang out with my friends, go out to eat when we're allowed to. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Rachel, will you tell us about you?
Hey, my name is Rachel Maggi, and I work for USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, kind of a mouthful, but it's a federal government agency. And my title is also biologist, but I have a little bit different twist on my job. I work with our farmers and our ranchers and our timberland owners that grow the food that we eat and the logs that build the houses that we just talked about the permitting process needing. So that's me. I live in Vancouver, Washington with my two daughters and my husband. I love gardening and I'm a big cook.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. Jeanette?
Hi, I'm Jeanette Burkhart. I'm a watershed planner for the Yakima Nation Fisheries Program. The Yakima Nation is one of the 39 federally recognized tribes in Washington state. And I work in the southern territories of the tribe, which is along the Columbia River, about the Wind River Basin out to the Tri-Cities. And my job runs the gamut from indoors to outdoors. I do everything from technical writing, working on salmon recovery plans, to habitat restoration work, and quite a bit of education and outreach. At the moment, because of the shutdown, I don't get to do the more fun parts of my job, so it's a lot of reviewing land use proposals like what Coley and Rachel were talking about, so development on lands that could have an impact on fish and their habitats. I am a gardener also. I love to be outside, so I'm glad that my job allows me to do that sometimes.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and I live in White Salmon. Did I say that? I'm not sure.
Thank you very much. Bengt, will you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bengt Coffin. I'm a hydrologist with the Mount Adams Ranger District, and that's part of the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in Washington. So if you've heard of Mount St. Helens or Mount Adams, that's the area that I cover in my work. And my job is all work around water. So I do water quality monitoring. I do environmental compliance documentation for any kind of road we want to build or campground we want to build or a timber sale. And I also do habitat restoration for fish. So I do a lot of work in rivers And that's certainly the best part of my job, part I like most. I've been doing this work for about 30 years with the Forest Service, and I love my job. I got into it primarily because I'm also an outdoor person. I like being outside. For fun, I like to mountain bike. I kiteboard over on the Columbia River. We have a dog. I have a family with one son who's about 18 years old. And we just got a handful of chicks. So we're going to be chick farmers here pretty soon.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So nice to meet all of you. We'll go in this same order, starting with Coley. I have a two-part question. The question is, what types of things do you do on a daily basis in your job? And what makes you passionate about your job? So Coley, will you start us off with that question? What kind of things do you do on a daily basis, and what makes you passionate about your work?
So similarly to Jeanette, it's a combination of indoor-outdoor work. And so I would say, and it varies by season. So right now we're ramping up for our field season, which is when we're outside a lot. So it really depends by day, but I would say probably 60% of the time I'm in the office. So I would be doing technical reports, looking at maps, working with our CAD department to create figure sets and things like that for delineations that we've done. So it's kind of nice. You get to be creative and kind of create things that people can conceptualize. Like I said, wetlands or anything that's on the ground that you've been out and kind of picked through. And then the other 40% of that time would be being out in the field. So for example, this week, I had 2 10-hour days where we were out on a site. We mapped oak trees, which are regulated in that area. We delineated wetlands, which is a lot of hole digging and playing in the mud. Getting rained on is part of that as well. And what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
What makes you passionate about your work?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I would say, like I mentioned, I really like being outdoors. And I think what makes me passionate about my work is we definitely know we're going to have development, and we know that we want to protect nature. And so my job is kind of the combination of those two things and making sure needs are met on both sides. And that's something I really appreciate, because I get to be outside and have those aha moments where you're just kind of like, you know, like I said, digging a hole and sitting in the grass and listening to the birds, and it's really lovely. But then you also get to help people. And I have clients where, you know, it's just people who are trying to build a house and they didn't know they had a wetland on their property, and you're helping them navigate that process while still protecting their resource. So it's a really nice combination.
Nice. Coley, have you always enjoyed being outdoors?
I have, yeah, more so later in life, as not that it's that late in my life, but yeah, I really have enjoyed those since a young age. So
very interesting. Rachel, will you tell us about what a normal day looks like in your job and what makes you passionate about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say that there is no normal day in my job, and that is one of the things that makes me passionate. I do different things every single day. Because Washington State is so diverse when you look at our fish and our wildlife populations. I mean, we've got the rainforest along the coast all the way to the wheat fields of the Palouse on the old Palouse Prairie. And it is just such a wide variety of critters that utilize our state. And I get to work with the landowners that are out there, like I said before, growing crops and raising livestock, growing trees. And a lot of those landowners have what we call resource concerns on their property. And I work with our field staff to go to those farms and ranches, take a ride in the truck with them, walk their forest land, and look at what they have. We identify a lot of different things out there as far as natural resource concerns, like someone mentioned mud. There's a lot of mud where you do a lot of work, working of the soil. And so we try to figure out ways that our landowners can protect the soil. And that relates to fisheries work, because we want to keep that soil on the ground and not running off into our streams to degrade our fish habitat. So my job, like others have mentioned, is kind of part in the office and part in the outside. I got into this work because I love being outside, and you will find as you go along in your career, the longer you're with an organization, And the higher kind of up the ladder you rise, the less time you actually get to go outside. So that's something to consider a lot when you plan your career, is really the difference between staying in the office to crunch numbers and write reports for other people that get to go and do the outside work. But with my job, I still maintain that connection with the land, and that's what makes me passionate about it.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Jeanette, how about you?
It's funny, we seem to have a lot of people that have non-standard days, and I think I fall into that category too. My days are different. Normally, my days are very different from day to day, and it's also seasonally dependent. So this time of year, normally I would be out in the field a lot more, and I would be doing more education and outreach with schools. We have a lot of spring related activities, field trips, watershed education field days outside, as well as restoration work that happens in the spring. But because of the shutdown and because of safety concerns, I'm doing a lot more of the office-y part of my job from home, obviously. But I do quite a bit of reviewing of documents and communication as the office part of my job, and that's important too. And I may not get as excited about reviewing land use plans as I do about going out and planting things, but I recognize that these are also very important things that affect habitat and the way people interact with their landscapes. So yeah, I think I'll leave that for the normal day. But passionate, I think I'm passionate about nature, and about also about trying to connect people with what is really valuable in their surroundings. So our habitats, our fisheries, and also trying to get people to connect to the sort of deep history of human use of these landscapes as well. And that's where, knowing something about how the tribes have lived on these lands for thousands of years is really important, and has been something that's really enriched my job a lot. And I'd like to try and pass that on and connect people to, tribal members that can talk about the really deep roots that they have in the land and to those natural resources. So that's sort of a piece of my job that I really, really love.
Thank you, Jeanette. Bengt, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with everyone. One of the best parts about the job is that it's not the same from one day to the next. And it's a great thing about being in the natural resource world is there's so many different things that are all interrelated. And so even as a hydrologist, I do work in other related to other fields. So for example, tomorrow I'm going out to look at a meadow in which there's habitat for a very rare butterfly, and that's part of the ecosystem here, and it's something that isn't found in a lot of places. And we want to do some things to help the butterfly out, and it happens to live right near a river. And so I'm going out as the river specialist and offering some support and joining our botanist and our wildlife biologist out in the field. So we're gonna take a look at that unit. Just a couple days ago, I was out with Jeanette, my fellow panelist here. We were looking at beaver habitat and some of the wonderful things beavers do for the aquatic network. And so that's some of the things I do. I also do a fair bit of data gathering, so collecting data and then analyzing data in the office, writing reports that share that data with the managers and with others who can use it. As I mentioned earlier, I do river habitat work. So one of the best things I do is going out in the field and just looking at streams that where there may be an opportunity to improve the habitat for salmon or steelhead that live in there, or trout. I also do a fair bit of work with partnerships. And so writing proposals for funding, or proposals to bring other organizations in to work with us on projects. And that's also one of the best parts of my job, is working with other people. why I'm passionate about the job. I love the outdoors. I love water. I like to drink clean water. And I also love the public lands that we have, the national forests that are all around us. I think in the Northwest here, we are blessed to have so many public lands that we can all access. And I really appreciate getting an opportunity to work on those lands and to kind of help them be maintained and improved over time.
Yeah, thank you. A quick follow-up for all of you, and we'll start with Banked if that's okay. How much of your job is like public facing? Like how often are you interacting with others in your job, and how often are you kind of working on your own?
Yeah, so I'm a scientist, and so I'm kind of in the back end of the building in the Forest Service. I don't deal with the public that often. Certainly if I'm out in the woods and working on a project, I see people there, here and there, but I'm not someone who's engaged in public involvement every day. So typically I'm working in an office with 5 to 10 other people. I have my own little space that I work in, but I collaborate quite a bit with the team that I'm on. And then I'll also work with organizations outside of ours in teams. And then on more of an occasional basis, I'll interact with the public. So not a whole lot of direct interaction.
Great. Jeanette, how about you? How much of your work is with others, and how much of the work is on your own?
I'm not sure how to quantify it exactly. I do both. I am sort of an interesting case among this panel, maybe because I'm a non-ologist. So I, am sort of at that interface between the technical people and the policy people and the public. And so I see my job oftentimes as translating what is going on the technical side of things to the public. And I also do a lot of collaborative work, like Bengt was saying. I'm on a number of different regional groups that look at things like weeds or climate change or protecting watersheds or, the impacts of recreation on the gorge. So there's both the close-up public and the larger public. I often will organize volunteer groups to help with restoration work as well. So that gets me out into the community. And like I mentioned, working with schools as well. So.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel, how about you?
Yeah, I would say I interact with small numbers of the public a lot. I work in a field office and we are open to the public. So we have people come in typically who know who we are. Again, someone who may want some advice from one of my coworkers on the best time to spread their manure on their fields to make their grass grow greener and faster. People stop by for that type of technical assistance. And so, often I'm just shooting people over to the next cubicle for someone to help. But if they have questions on fish and wildlife, that's when I interact. And then I also do a fair amount of teaching workshops and that type of thing to the general public about fish and wildlife in Washington.
Great. And Coley, how about you?
Yeah, I would say that my position, it's kind of mid-level in terms of the amount of interaction with other people. So I actually work in a satellite office in Washougal, Washington, and there's 4 of us that work there, and we're kind of constantly interacting together. So we have a really tight-knit sort of situation there. And then it just depends. So we interact a lot with the clients who are contracting us. So whether that's, like I was saying earlier, a single-family homeowner or a port, like a port for a city or jurisdiction that needs a survey done or something. We work with them pretty much constantly every step of the way, as well as with other, say, engineers or other firms who are working on the project in a different capacity. And then occasionally we will actually testify at hearings or things similar to that to sort of, in a more technical manner, express the findings of what's been found. So yeah, so I would say it's really kind of mid-level or in the middle there.
Great. Great. We have a student question here. And to prove to our students that are watching that we are actually reading these questions, this one came from Indiana Jones. The question we have is, does your work look like what you thought it would look like? When you were a student and you thought you would work in sort of a natural resources work or the kind of field you're in right now, assuming this is what you thought you might be doing, does it match up with what you thought it would look like? Coley, can we start with you?
Yeah, and so I did not know that I wanted to go into natural resources initially. And so I actually was going into teaching, and the degree that I wanted had to be paired with sort of another focus, so I chose environmental studies, and that was when I really got geared up for this sort of work. And so I did not know what I wanted to do for a long time, even after I got my degree. So I would say it looks like what I would have envisioned for sort of the ultimate situation. So that's really nice. I didn't really have any expectations, but I love that I get to work outside. I have a little bit of office time as well. Like I said, I get to be creative. So it's, I would say it's difficult because I didn't have any expectations going in really, but it has worked out very well for me, so.
Interesting, yeah. Rachel, does your work look like what you thought it might?
No, not at all. 100% no. When I was down in college at Oregon State, I walked into the Fish and Wildlife building on accident one day, and I saw the job board, and I saw that you could get hired on to go and do northern spotted owl surveys. And I thought, what a cool thing to do. I want to do that. And so during school, I really thought that I was going to be out, trapping and capturing and doing all this data collection. And I really don't do any of that. Looking back, I think my courses that prepared me best were those that were, like some of you were talking about, working interdisciplinary with other people, botanists and foresters and hydrologists and engineers. A lot of what I do involves just more social sciences, communication, and learning how to collaborate and coming up with solutions that work for the private landowner and will protect our natural resources. So I don't know if it's just biologists by nature, but we tend to be kind of shoved out there to bring groups together and collaborate. So it's a great job, but boy, it's very different than what I thought I'd be doing when I graduated. Very interesting.
Rachel, did I hear correctly that your entry into this field came from an accident?
Yeah, absolutely. When I started school at Oregon State, I wanted to be a high school biology teacher. And that's what I wanted to do. And so I started out, like many undergraduates, just doing their basic courses and just wandered into a building on campus I'd never been on before and walked by that job board. And that's really what got the wheels turning, that indeed you could get paid to do work outside. And it just took me back to I wanted to work outside. I loved being on lakes, fishing with my dad. Anyway, it all kind of came together on accident. Yeah.
Oh, a little bit of luck, but also you taking an opportunity that was put before you.
Yeah,
That's
for
great.
sure.
Yeah, nice. Jeanette, how about you? Does your work look like what you thought it might?
No, not at all. In fact, it's not what I went to school for technically either. I'm a language major, and I was always interested in science. I grew up outdoors, spent a lot of time outdoors, was always fascinated with, critters and plants and that kind of thing. And so when I went to college, I kind of got to that point where I needed to either specialize in science math track, which I had always been interested in, or go down the liberal arts route. And somehow I ended up doing liberal arts and ended up with a degree in that, but never lost the interest in the sciences. And I have done a lot of different jobs in my life, everything from, making soap to being a mentor or a tutor to marketing kiteboards to doing high-tech public relations. So, I've bounced all over the place. And what I realized along the way is that I kept trying to be a specialist when I'm really a generalist. And there's something to be said. I want to put a plug in for generalists because there is a huge need for them, exactly for the reasons that Rachel and Coley and Bengt were talking about, is that communication piece. and being able to understand both sides of things. So understanding the technical stuff, but also being able to sort of break it down and communicate it. So my job has, I feel like, built on a lot of the skills that I have learned from other careers, but it's sort of the culmination in a way. So I'm getting to incorporate skills that I've learned along the way in really diverse places, as well as my passions, and call it a job, which I feel really grateful for.
That's great. Jeanette, to clarify for our viewers, what do you mean by a generalist?
So a generalist is somebody who doesn't specialize in a particular field, like a hydrologist, for example. Not to say that a hydrologist doesn't do a lot of different things, but it's not confined to one field. So a lot of what I do is very interdisciplinary, like we've been talking about too. I do, writing, I do communication, I do some web work, but I also have to understand the biology that I'm dealing with to be able to see how it interacts with land use, for example. So it's a lot of skills and knowledge that you have to kind of pull from different places in order to understand a bigger picture, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes students get the feedback that they're kind of like a jack of all trades or a Jill of all trades, meaning they kind of, they know a little bit about a lot of things, or they know a medium amount about a lot of things, and that might sound more like the generalist style.
Exactly. And, I think there's a word called dilettante, which is also used to describe that. And it's sort of a negative word. And in a way, I think that's unfortunate, because I think people that do understand something about a lot of things have a lot of value to bring.
Great. Thank you for that. Bengt, does your work look like what you thought it might?
Yeah, and it's changed over time. So it did look like I thought it would when I first started work, and I did a lot of on-the-ground work. I was in the field a lot, measuring rivers and water quality. Did a lot of that kind of work that was very hydrology oriented and hydrology centric. As I've grown and evolved in the position, I have become more of a generalist, kind of like, I wouldn't say I'm anything like, Jeanette was describing, but I have moved way over in that direction from being way over in the science field and very focused on hydrology, to where the amount of time I spend doing actual hydrology work now is pretty limited, and it's really more how to integrate the hydrology work that I do and that people who work for me are doing, how to integrate that into decision making and integrate it with the input from many other interests, and whether they be natural resource interests or others, to try and come up with a project or a proposal that is really meets everyone's needs better. So it's kind of evolved over time to something that I probably never thought that I would be doing the kind of work that I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if any of our panelists, I'm still thinking about Rachel's answer that kind of stumbled into a building and found this good opportunity. To our other panelists, do you have any similar experiences where an opportunity sort of fell in your lap, like an opportunity, you kind of stumbled upon it and took advantage of it?
I was sort of in between jobs, and I was working at a fish research lab as a seasonal worker here locally, the Columbia River Research Lab, which is a U.S. Geological Survey facility. But during that time, I went to a friend's wedding, and I ran into who would become my new boss. My friend is a fish biologist, and I was chatting with this individual and talking about how I'd been doing some technical writing and editing. And he said, "Oh, you do that? Do you want a job?" And because they were just in the process of working on salmon recovery plans, which are like these large regional plans to help recover salmon throughout the Northwest. And I said, maybe. And so I basically started this job on a contract to work on the technical writing aspect of it. And then things just kept, evolving from there. And I added more and more aspects to my job to where it is today. And it continues to evolve.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you. All right. My next question from a student. Question is, how many years of college does it take to get to do your job? And what types of jobs exist in your field that don't require college? Rachel, can we start with you?
Sure. So I would say for an entry-level biologist in NRCS, you need a bachelor's degree. That's a strong way to start. I have a bachelor's in science. I actually have 2 degrees, a degree in fishery science and a degree in wildlife biology that I got at the same time. So because there was a lot of class overlap, I did that in 5 years. So, but I would say that I could do my job with just one of those bachelor's degrees. As far as what you can do in the field without a degree, I think there are opportunities, and they're really good to, just kind of dip your toe in the water to see if this is the type of work that you want to do. And those really are a lot of working on crews like AmeriCorps has crews that you can get hired on, that you will be working on the implementation side of natural resources, doing the types of habitat restoration projects that others on the panel have been talking about. Washington Conservation Corps is another one you can get hired on. And then locally, there's a lot of paid and unpaid volunteer positions available through Clark Parks and Rec Department. Metro has a lot of volunteer positions, but just really get out there, experience it. And you're not just going to be learning from your fellow crewmates, you're going to be being able to interact with the people who actually plan these habitat projects. And that's how you'll get to kind of see what that next step is. So yes, you can definitely get started even before you're out of high school.
Oh, great. Coley, for your job, how much college is required, and are there jobs in your field that don't require college?
Yeah, so I would say I have a bachelor's degree, and that is, I think the majority of the people in my company, which is what I know best, also have that level of education, with a couple people who have obtained master's degrees also. So I actually also have a certificate from University of Washington, and that was a year-long. And it was, once I knew that I was sort of gearing myself up for consulting, I did that, and it was in wetland science and management. And that was really helpful in sort of getting me specific experience. And that's with that, I got this job. So kind of similarly to what Rachel was saying, there's definitely little opportunities like internships or certificates or things that aren't necessarily like the 4-year track that could sort of gear you up for a job in this field. I think in terms of primarily, again, just like my company or people that I'm familiar with, if you didn't have a degree, what I've seen is mostly implementation of restoration. So sort of like in the field, which is awesome. And that sort of level of work. Otherwise, I'm not completely sure, just since I'm a little bit narrower with my experience and that, but.
Yeah. Coley, is a bachelor's degree typically a 4-year degree?
It is, yep. And I actually have a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies. And so I was a little bit worried a lot of the time, since my role as a biologist, I was a little bit worried going into it that I would need a Bachelor of Science. And I found that the combination of education and experience that I got before this it didn't make a difference. It was fine. I also worked several internships prior to this. And so I think that combination of education experience was really important in getting my job.
Great. Thank you for that. Bengt, how about you? What does your job require?
A bachelor's degree to get into the job I'm in, but there are many jobs that are in the field that I'm working in that don't require a bachelor's degree. So we hire students. I've hired students every summer who don't have a bachelor's degree, and who are either in pursuit of that or are thinking about what they might want to do. And so yeah, you can get in without any formal college education. And I think one of the nice things about the federal government is that there are many positions that you can also observe and even try. If you were to get a summer position with the Forest Service, you could try all kinds of different positions in natural resources or law enforcement, a whole number of fields. And so that's a thought just about the federal government, is that there are so many branches of the federal government that once you're in there and you have a position, you can actually look around and get a sense of all these other jobs and try them out. There's opportunities to work for another supervisor for 2 or 3 months at a time. And so there's some great opportunities there to explore different fields.
Interesting. That's that kind of idea of getting your foot in the door, right? Getting that entry-level job, and that opens up additional opportunities that you might not be able to see from the outside.
Exactly. And I have been working in my position for 30 years, and I've hired many students who are either in their first year of college or starting college, and I can see them now in various agencies around the Portland area and in the Forest Service. Some of them have actually gone into hydrology and have moved into positions that others have gone into very different fields. One of the best summer seasonals I had is now an acupuncturist. She went to Chinese medicine school down in Portland. So anyway, there's a lot of different places to go, but I would offer that the best thing I think to do is to go out there and try a job, whether you're just job shadowing or you're interning or you're actually getting paid for your work. Try one out, and you'll not only learn a lot about that position, but you'll be able to look around you and see, what are other people doing? Is there something around here that I like better than what I took as a job?
Great, thank you. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads when you say take that job and learn from that experience. Jeanette, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, in fisheries, the students will probably make the connection that a lot of us work either directly or tangentially with fisheries, and that's huge in the Northwest. And there's actually a lot of funding for fisheries work, and that offers a whole broad range of different job opportunities. So, there are 2-year degrees for folks that work in hatcheries, which we have quite a few of in the Northwest. There's the habitat work, like we all appear to be involved in. There are lots of different variations on the theme, and lots of internships and technician jobs that don't require a degree. But there's also opportunity for advancement there. And I think the more students can job shadow or intern or volunteer to get a sense of what's out there, even if what they're doing isn't exactly what they had in mind, it might open up some new ideas and develop skills that they can use in the future.
And maybe some contacts, some networking.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's nice to know people in these different fields that you want to get into. Our panel last week was on animal health, and there was a lot of discussion of mentors. So to that note, I wonder if any of you have had mentors along the way.
I can jump in kind of on a slightly different twist to that. My biggest, most influential mentor really was before I even went to college. It all started out with a rock star high school biology teacher. And it just takes that one person to spark your interest. And I knew from then that I wanted to go into the biology field. And like I said before, when I got to college, it was a whole different thing. But I can't underscore those early relationships and how it really shaped my career. And I've had a lot of amazing mentors in my job now that really reach out and make sure that I'm thriving on all levels of my job. And I make that a point, and I've been doing my job for 25 years. And so I try to return those favors now. I just visited yesterday with a brand new biologist that started in Central Washington, and it's her 3rd day of the job. So I needed her to know that there was another person out there that she could reach out to. So yeah, mentors are incredibly important to keep you focused.
My very first job in natural resources, came about because I went to a conference and I saw a guy speak and I really liked him. I liked him personally and I liked the job that he was doing. And so I called him up after the conference. I found out he worked for Seattle City and he was in water resources. And I called the city and got his phone number and said, hey, could I come down and chat with you at your coffee break just to learn about your job? And it wasn't really in my comfort zone to do that, but one of my professors at school suggested that that would be a good thing to do. It turned out to be an awesome thing. Turned out to be like a 45-minute conversation. And they ended up sending me a letter like 6 months later, just out of the blue, saying they had a job opening. And there was all of a sudden, you know, from a simple 10-minute having coffee with the guy, which really sort of got me stoked for the whole field. But then it turned into something much more than that. So that was instrumental for me.
I also want to put a plug in for the non-job specific mentors because I think they're just as important. You know, I was realizing after Rachel talked about her past teachers, how much those folks can have an influence on your interests and sort of fostering curiosity and different skill sets. And, you know, I was just thinking about one mentor of mine that wasn't even in the professional field. It was in acting, and she actually taught me so much about committing to a situation and listening to others and give and take, and, you know, a lot of really important life skills that I apply to my job, but they aren't necessarily specific to my job, if that makes sense. So don't forget about those people. Learn from everybody.
Learn from everybody. That's right. I see a lot of nodding going on right now. Thank you for that. A question this is a student question, and I'll reword it so it's inclusive of all of us here. Do you see any advantage or disadvantage to being your gender in your job?
Coming into my position as well, I was a little bit, just being a young woman also, and working with people who had maybe been in this field for 20, 30 years, you know, there was definitely sort of some insecurity about not knowing, some, like, especially with people in different fields like engineers or things like that, but you learn as you go, and we're all humans, and those insecurities were unfounded also. So I think that there's no advantage or disadvantage to being a woman in this field. And like I said, we're all out there digging holes, no matter who it is, when we're delineating wetlands and carrying all our gear. And yeah, it's a very even playing field. So that's what I found as I've worked in this position as well.
Thank you.
I would agree with that. I would second all that it feels like there's plenty of women in the field that I work in, and that's actually encouraging, and it feels normal, and luckily it doesn't seem to be an issue. Whether it's field work or the more technical side of things, I feel like it's a pretty good split.
Our last question is, what is your one last piece of advice for our middle school and high school students who are watching as they are deciding for themselves what field they would want to work in and what their life looks like after high school? Do you have a piece of advice for us? And Colby, could we start with you? Do you have any advice for our viewers?
Yeah, I think that my biggest piece of advice and that I found the most helpful is just to try everything. So like I said, I worked quite a few internships, and that was, you know, volunteer in my free time, but it really helped me kind of hone in on what I wanted to do. So I worked with salmon restoration. I volunteered for water quality testing and all kinds of stuff. And it really helped me get a sense of what I enjoyed and sort of what career path I wanted to take. And even similarly with classes and things like that, that's really what got me into it. Was, I think, my first course on just like ecosystem interactions. And it was about, you know, what reintroducing wolves to Yellowstone, the impact of that and it just like blew my mind. And so if I hadn't taken that class, I don't know that I would have gained like such a huge interest. So just dabble in everything that you can. And I think it's probably one of the most helpful things, especially for me. So.
Thank you. Bengt, do you have any last advice for our viewers?
Maybe my suggestion, I have several, but maybe I would say kind of similar to what Coley was saying. Don't maybe put yourself, don't feel too much pressure to identify the field right away. You have plenty of time in your life. You're going to change as you grow further, and take a breadth of classes and interests, and don't respond when people feel the need to say, what are you going to be? You don't need to know that yet. Give yourself the time to find out, give yourself the time to try a bunch of different things, and it will come.
Great advice. Jeanette, how about you?
Yeah, I would echo what both Coley and Bengt have said about that, and that, you know, really exposing yourself to different opportunities and different environments and different ways of looking at things is really important. Don't box yourself in too early. I mean, I feel like, you know, I'm still learning my job, and I will continue to, and you just have to at some point realize that you will never stop learning, and that's really a good thing. So learn wherever you can from whomever you can, and stay curious.
Great. And Rachel, any advice for our viewers?
Oh, those were all such great inspirational pieces of advice. I'll just end by saying, you know, your career path is your own, and there is no one right way to do it. Someone like myself, I've been in my job 25 years, one agency my entire career out of school. That's not necessarily normal anymore. And you don't have to feel like a success or a failure because you don't follow any specific career path. You will find your own way, and don't let that stop you. Keep an open mind and stay curious.
Oh, great. Well, to Bengt's point, I think I'm thinking back to our previous career panels, this question of like, what's some advice you have for our viewers? Over and over again, I have heard the response of, don't narrow yourself down too far. Stay flexible, stay open, explore opportunities as they come to you. Because I do think, as you said, from kindergarten on, we're constantly being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? We're constantly being asked to narrow our choices. And the advice we've heard from so many panelists has been to not follow that path, but to actually consider as many opportunities as you have before you. And when it comes time to decide, then you can decide, which is not kindergarten. So thank you so much for being on this panel today. For our natural resource panelists. Students, I hope that you heard something about a field that you didn't know about before, and that you're inspired by these professionals. Maybe today you learned that you have discovered what you would like to do after high school. Maybe you discovered today that this is not the field that you'd like to go into, and both are really valuable learnings. So thank you for our panelists for helping us explore those. And now I'll turn things back over to our host, Scott.
Okay, thank you, Chad. And thank you once again, panelists. That was outstanding. And I love the theme of remaining curious and being prepared for opportunities that may come your way, because you never know what those will be. So thanks again, panelists. Thank you to students for logging in today and for submitting questions. Next week, we'll have our construction and engineering panel. So we're excited about that. And we hope to see you next week. Thanks all. Bye-bye.